Well, first of all, welcome everybody. Can you all hear me okay? Yeah, well, I know you can. Good afternoon and good morning to our friends over in Hawaii. My name is Joe Cap and this is Amber, and we're here today in our nation's capital to celebrate National Entrepreneurship Week, and couldn't be more excited about the content of today's presentation with incubators and accelerators and the libraries. And so we have a lot of stuff to cover. But before we do that, we have a couple of housekeeping things. So let's go ahead and jump right in. First of all, I just want to remind everybody that National Entrepreneurship Week really is a host of partners that get together to really help uplift and bring entrepreneurship to the forefront in communities across the United States. So regardless of the size, regardless of the location, National Entrepreneurship Week is really about democratizing the ability for any American to start a business. And what better places to do that than accelerators and incubators, and also our nation's libraries. So feel free to go ahead, next slide. Feel free to go ahead and take a look at our website at nationalentrpreneurshipweek.org. National Entrepreneurship Week was actually founded in 2006 by an act of Congress as a result of work from EntreEd and the Kauffman Foundation. And so we're super excited that the last couple of years, next slide, that we've been able to go ahead and really sort of revitalize it, restart it, and bring it to a larger national profile. So my name is Joe Cap. I am president of the National Center for Resource Development, here along with Amber Ravencroft. Amber and her team have been amazing with regards to coordination and putting together graphics and a whole host of tweeting and stuff like that. So Amber, without you and the great work that you've done, this would not have been possible. So we're super excited to kick off National Entrepreneurship Week. Next slide. So as a part of that, what we ask is that everybody please just take a moment and add the Twitter handle to your Twitter feed. There's been a lot of activity. In fact, we've seen a significant uptick and increase in the number of folks who are tweeting. And so the information is there on your screen. And we ask you to please go ahead and give a shout out during the course of the week. Also, just as a quick aside, on Wednesday from 3 o'clock to 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, National Entrepreneurship Week is going to try to break Twitter. So what we're asking is that everybody go ahead and tweet back and forth just about eShip, about entrepreneurship, whatever it is that they feel like they want to go ahead and add to the conversation using the hashtag National eShip Week. Next slide, please. So I'm going to hand it over to Amber to kind of take us through a couple housekeeping things, and we will launch right into it.
Okay, thank you so much. Side note, if you are interested and need any promotional materials, we do have a lot of pre-made graphics for National eShip Week available at natleshipweek.org, right there at the bottom of your screen. From a logistics standpoint, all of our participants will be muted upon entry. You probably already noticed that. That way, we don't have any feedback while the speakers are talking. If there are any questions, please enter those in the chat function, and if time permits at the end of the webinar, which we have a lot of great speakers, so we're not sure if we'll be able to do a live Q&A, we will be sure to email those questions to those speakers for follow-up individually. As a reminder, the webinar is recorded and will be available for view within 1 week after the live viewing. It'll be available at natleshipweek.org, and we'll also share that with all our speakers to propel on their individual networks. And then we want to make sure that you stay till the end of the webinar so that you can stay tuned for some exciting plans we have coming up for National eShip Week 2020. We're working on expansion efforts, and we're really excited to talk about those opportunities. So with that, I would like to hand it over to begin the Libraries and Incubators webinar with our two lead partners, EveryLibrary and InBIA. You can actually follow along, tweet any quotes that you find really riveting, show your support of these organizations by following them on Twitter as well. And there are their usernames. And with that, John.
Amber, thanks so much. Joe, I really appreciate it. It's nice to be here. I'm John Kraska. I'm founder and executive director of an organization called EveryLibrary. The idea that any library funding opportunity anywhere should matter to every library everywhere. We're actually set up as a 501c4 organization. We're a super PAC for libraries, and like any good super PAC, we have an agenda. Our agenda is to try and, make libraries in all of our communities, whether it's urban, suburban, or rural, stronger. We do that by working on funding opportunities and also talking to Americans about different solutions that the library does well beyond literacy and entrepreneurship, support for starters, the support for the small business community, for ideation, the side gig. It's a huge part of what public libraries do around the country, and it's perhaps the best kept secret for folks who are doing economic development work. And I want to share, along with my colleague Kim Guile at Kansas City Public Library and Leanne Cusack from Gale Cengage Learning Company, about some of the secrets that you can do as you're looking to, put these community anchor institutions to work for you as best we can. Amber, next slide, please. So there's some missing pieces that we've identified over the years as part of the entrepreneurship ecosystem that libraries, can potentially help fill. Some of those missing pieces to entrepreneurship are also filled by the incubators and accelerators out there. They're filled by mentors. They're filled by, business intelligence, folks, is one of the key elements that's missing often. Somebody's got a great idea for a business, and yet they don't know their market, nor perhaps do they have access to the market. The technology, depending on what kind of resources you have personally, I can walk over the digital divide on the devices that are laying around my house, and there are people who've got great ideas who need that access point. Next slide, please, Amber. Fundamentally, the public library is in a beautiful position to act as the community's incubator and the community's accelerator in informal as well as formal settings. The business intelligence that exists for market information analytics, the ideas that have already gone before, patent and trademark, what's behind the paywall usually that's available from the library card. Well, my colleague Leanne is going to be taking you through a little bit more of that in a few moments. The biggest place that public libraries provide a degree of leverage to small businesses, starters, entrepreneurs, is the access to the marketplace, the access to the validation in the marketplace. My colleague Kim is going to be talking about that a little bit in a moment from the Kansas City Public Library's perspective. I don't want you to lose sight of the fact that the library is a clean, well-lighted place with plumbing, which is a big deal if you're going to be a co-working space, and also the big pipeline to the internet. The technology resources that are there, from Fab Labs to maker spaces. I know a couple libraries that have kitchens. I know a couple libraries that have kilns. This is everything from a single owner-operator up to a fledgling business that employs folks around the community. In fact, next slide, please. Let me take you through very briefly the 7 types of businesses that libraries are experts at helping to incubate, accelerate, move from an idea to marketplace. Retail. Right now, there are libraries out there that have retail spaces with their friends organizations and their foundations. Retail spaces that could have pop-up stores happen. They're shovel ready for it, folks. The food trucks, restaurants, and food service, the farmers markets and the food businesses that have started in the parking lot, in the lobby, because it's restaurant week at the library. Folks, if you're not using the library right now as a venue for this, you're leaving something on the table. Likewise, the local artisans and craftspeople who can have access to the market because, what does a librarian do best? They say to you, you liked that book, how about this other book? What librarians do best is also to say, these businesses in our community, they're at the heart of our community, we're going to bring you in and bring you together with them. The consultancies and sector-specific talent that gets done in a co-working space that is the public library, and the support that an economic development corporation, a business incubator, or a business community can provide to the library if you currently don't have those resources in place already. We can't overlook the side gig, but fundamentally, what I'm looking for from our library communities is how do we employ the maximum number of people with the best ideas possible. Next slide, please. And I want to give you one other bit of insight into how public libraries work as you're thinking through and listening to what Kim and Leanne are going to be talking about in a minute. Libraries are shovel ready for public money, philanthropic money, donor money, the public-private partnership that puts this economic development engine to work is in place, ready to go in, well, almost 17,000 fixed site locations around the country. Go ahead, Amber. I'm going to hand it off to my colleague Kim Guile. She's Community Reference Manager at the Kansas City Public Library. She's got the on-the-ground, real-world experience there in the middle of our country, and she's going to be sharing with you about how libraries around the country are doing this right. Thanks, Kim.
Hi, John. Thank you so much. So let's start off with what we all know. We know that over 99% of the U.S. employers are small businesses, according to the most recent census. But before we talk about those services and professionals that the libraries brings to the table, let's talk about the economic benefits of just having a library in your community, period. Libraries are retail anchors. We know that the Seattle Public Library's Central Library is associated with $16 million in net new spending in Seattle in its first year of operations. Nearby businesses report increases in spending associated with visitors to that Central Library, and increases in the use of library resources contribute directly to business productivity in personal and professional developments and individual livelihood, as you all know. So I challenge you as we go through this to consider libraries as potential market access entry points. Parking lots can be turned into markets for local business fairs. Independently run coffee shops are popular in several libraries, and so on, as John mentioned. And we also know that small businesses are helped tremendously by civic institutions, whether that's through access to networks, insights into navigating legal landscapes, or information about how to scale. And libraries are civic institutions. We are anchor institutions, and we are uniquely situated to provide that neutral space and point of view. Will you do the next slide, please, Amber? Okay, so this is the St. Louis County savings calculator that they take to their EDCs and chambers to pitch partnerships. And if a business, as you can see here, uses one of each of these every single year, they already save $12,000. And this is not unique. Libraries across the country provide comparable services and resources. And as a partner, libraries make your members and your customers look like you're working more for them by providing access to these resources and services. And we also add value through research skills. We can teach these research skills to you and to your members so that people get the maximum value out of all of these resources. And ultimately, you're going to look better to your members if you include the library as a partner. Libraries benefit you through exposure and through education for your members at no additional cost whatsoever. Next slide, Amber. So the Urban Libraries Council, in collaboration with the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation, which I already got a shout out at the beginning of this webinar, worked with libraries across the country to strengthen the role libraries play in nurturing and promoting entrepreneurship in the communities that they serve. The initiative was designed to leverage and develop the library's unique assets and capacities to create hubs for entrepreneurship, as well as advance equity and community economic health by increasing support for all entrepreneurs, particularly women and people of color, immigrants, and veterans. So as a result, a toolkit was created that provides library leaders with strategies and models to enhance their entrepreneurial services. And I'll outline some of the best practices that help to inform this work of this cohort, as well as other libraries who are doing really incredible things for local small businesses. Next slide, Amber. So some examples. These gentlemen received up to $20,000 to start their own businesses from the Brooklyn Public Library's Power Up program, a business plan competition. So since 2003, they have nurtured over 8,300 individuals with over 1,000 business plans and awarded more than $400,000 to Brooklyn entrepreneurs. Their success stories include more than 80 companies with passions for food and drink, health and wellness, arts and crafts, media and fashion, education, social justice, and cultural diversity. The Brooklyn Public Library is a large urban library, but that does not preclude smaller libraries from doing similar things. Small business contests are doable on different scales, even if you don't have a partnership with a corporate donor like they do have in the Dime Community Bank in Brooklyn. Next slide, Amber. When it comes to business classes, libraries provide top-notch content thanks to professionals on staff as well as partnerships within the business community. The Kansas City Public Library often uses a learning circle format to teach skills. Several attendees will get together to take online classes together, the content of which is informed by local needs. The Pima County Public Library has regular classes to help people monetize their side hustle. And the Snow Isle Public Library has a meetup group of over 500 people where library business classes are shared. And many of these classes are offered in person and online. Next slide, please, Amber. Maker spaces, as John said, are increasingly common in libraries across the country. At the Black and Veatch Makerspace in Johnson County Library, you can print prototypes for your invention or even replacement parts for your equipment. The space also has PCs and Macs loaded with software to help you 2D design, 3D modeling, audio video editing, and more. There is a sound booth, a vinyl cutter, 2 and 3D scanners, sewing machines, soldering kits, laser cutters, CNC cutters, and the list goes on, and that is only at one library. And everything that you do in that space is free, thanks to the partnership they have with Black and Veatch, a local engineering, consulting, and construction company. Next slide, Amber. In the Cecil County Public Library in Maryland, they launched a small business information center in 2016, and their focus group of 60 businesses reported 78 new jobs. At the Pima County Public Library, they host job fairs for small businesses to find new recruits for all of those jobs that they create. Next slide, Amber. And finally, the Level Up co-working space at the downtown Spokane Public Library is an active collaborative space. It has large community tables with power and USB plugs, a laptop bar, and comfortable seating. iMac computers loaded with design software are available, as well as high quality color printer. They also feature a high-tech classroom with interactive whiteboards and state-of-the-art video conferencing equipment where presentations can be recorded for future use. And in this space, you can spend time with librarians, meet with other people, or just work on your own without interruption. And perhaps the most impressive thing in this library is access to a Bloomberg terminal. As you know, access to real-time financial news and analytics, communication, charts, liquidities, and functionalities are all needed to put financial and market research knowledge into action. And the Spokane Public Library is one of only 2 public libraries in the country that offer access to a Bloomberg terminal like this. So now we're going to turn it over to Gail. Thanks, everyone.
Leanne, we cannot hear you.
Yeah, try looking on your computer and just see if you can unmute on yours, on your end.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
There we
go.
Perfect. All right. Sorry for that. Hi, again, I'm Leanne Cusack, Senior Director of Product Development for Public Libraries at Gale. If you're not familiar with us, Gale's been a provider of research and educational resources to libraries for more than 60 years. Can you guys turn that off? Our mission is to help public libraries to expand their role in communities they serve with insights and programs that impact education and drive economic growth. I'll be taking you through some key informational assets that are likely already available at your local public library to support small business incubation. Next slide, please, Amber. Can you disconnect that? To start, let me share a few things we take as inspiration for the products we create to support small business and public libraries. It's really amazing to think about the role entrepreneurship has played in fueling America's economic innovation and prosperity, with small businesses having generated more than 65% of the new jobs over the past 40 years. And the American public continues to see libraries as essential to supporting entrepreneurship and local business. Next slide, please, Amber. Let's go to the next one. Perfect. Gale, as a provider of resources to libraries, is focused on supporting entrepreneurs through every step in starting a business and building vibrant communities in the process. This is our small business roadmap. It's a great visualization of these resources and how they come together to support that process. For example, Small Business Resource Center collects informational resources around specific topics related to planning, starting, funding, and managing a business. Think of this as the place an entrepreneur goes for a how-to on small business. and it includes nearly 900 real-world business plans. Another is legal forms, which provides hundreds of professional, state-specific business and other legal document templates. But today I'll focus on two resources, Small Business Builder and Demographics Now. Consider these the hidden gems that are already part of the informatics and market intelligence available through most libraries. Next slide, please, Amber. When thinking about helping libraries support small business, it made sense to start with the first step for anyone looking to start one. That's creating a business plan. And that leads us to the Gale Small Business Builder. This resource provides a recommended step-by-step workflow covering ideation through managing a business's financials. And it includes great tips, inline help, and links to additional resources so each of those steps is clear. From the entrepreneur profile to the finished business plan, Gale Small Business Builder helps the entrepreneur take action. Amber, next slide, please. And here's how that works. Let's say I want to start a food truck business. It's a huge industry, about $1.2 billion and growing. The first step is the entrepreneur profile. Amber, can you help advance this? There's some animation in this slide. Excellent. The entrepreneur profile is really meant to help with self-reflection. So, for example, do I have the skills and resources to start a business, or do I need a partner? Can I really turn a cooking hobby into a full-time gig? Some important questions. Then business ideation. Who's my demographic? Are there regulations I need to be aware of? Where are the best places to park that will get foot traffic, like industrial parks, concert venues, or at the library? The product provides a framework similar to the business plan canvas to help. The break-even analysis, the prospects for a food truck business are pretty promising. Trucks can gross about $300,000 a year, but what about the costs of a truck, outfitting a truck, a point of sale system, insurance, gas, and employees? This is a step that provides a read on the feasibility of a business. And now the business plan, I can take what I've learned and pull it all together in a view of my mission, plan, and financials for a small business loan. And if I'm lucky enough to have a growing food truck business, I want to consider growing my fleet and adding a truck. Financial projections helps me know if I can still turn a profit if I do. Amber, next slide, please. Now let's take a look at those steps in the Gale Small Business Builder product. This is the dashboard view. By putting this tool in the hands of the entrepreneur, libraries enable them to develop an entrepreneurial mindset and help from a strong foundational understanding of the business planning and management life cycle. And we have a mentorship module that connects entrepreneurs to a SCORE mentor and supports business plan collaboration. Next slide, please. A business plan's effectiveness relies on the strength of the market research that supports it. Demographics Now is a library resource for market intelligence that provides in-depth consumer and geographic analysis. It offers advanced analytics and mapping tools that allow users to run reports with complete demographic information for any geographic territory. Next slide, please. With that detailed demographic data, Demographics Now can be used to gain consumer and market insight for opening a business, finding an untapped audience for products and services, analyzing the shifts and needs of a given population, and a whole lot more. Next slide, please. But if there's one thing I can help underscore as part of today's conversation, it's that libraries are ready and waiting to help. And with a set of resources like the ones that you've heard about today and so many others that support entrepreneurship and are available with only a library card. A personal note, I've been a part of the library world for about 20 years, and it's far too common that the library's resources and learning opportunities go unnoticed by the organizations that are part of the small business ecosystem. And that's really just a matter of awareness, but raising that awareness is a huge challenge. Today, I think the secret's out, and I hope you feel empowered to seek out the rich resources that public libraries have to offer entrepreneurs, and will encourage the organizations you support to do the same. Thank you.
Leanne, I really appreciate that insight. And having Leanne and the team from Gale Cengage here, having Kim and her insights on the ground in Kansas City Public Library, and from around the country for libraries, the whole opportunity here, the whole cloth approach to supporting somebody, whether they've got just a second idea to help bring more prosperity to their family, or they've got a big idea. The secret sauce, though, can you get the next slide there, Amber? the secret thing to this all, I mean, Kim talked about maker and fab and, space, and Leanne talked about collection. It's the humans. When we look at the ecosystem builders that we're trying to bring online for helping people take their ideas to the marketplace, helping to build businesses that thrive, the folks who work at the libraries, and this is a nice team that Kim's got there at Kansas City Public Library. One of the places that, as an economic development corporation, I would be looking at adding incremental growth to in a very low cost, high impact way would be to supplement library staff if they don't have enough folks there in the room right now to do what we're aspirationally suggesting can be done. We also, if you don't mind, have some ideas here around, well, what's the one thing you could do with a library? If you've only got one opportunity to put some good idea to work, I wanted to show you the one thing that might be the maximum. Next slide, please. Childcare businesses. Childcare businesses right now are a triple threat. They provide some person or persons with a viable small business that they can run, either center-based or home-based. They provide workforce release time, if you will. I've got 2 kids at home. I can't do everything if I got to stay home all the time. One of the biggest impediments is quality childcare. For me, for my families, for people I know, the triple threat here also is that it impacts high-quality childcare with a public library at its core. Also impacts early childhood literacy, reading by grade level. I would suggest, folks, Amber, if you don't mind, looking at the childcare businesses that you could put together as a true ecosystem builder with the library as a partner. Next slide, if you could. We've got some additional resources. Oh, I'm sorry, forgive me. Can you go back one? I apologize. At the end of the slide, what you're going to see is some a bibliography, because it's a library thing. We got to have a bibliography. And it's got local folks, regional folks who can help you out, as well as my contact information, Kim's and Leanne's. Now, Amber, it's my real pleasure to introduce Andrea from InBIA. This is a wonderful meeting opportunity here between what the informal and the formal does, and the capacity building that happens through a library card and the librarians, and a more than a clean, well-lighted place. It's the incubation of tomorrow's businesses. I'm looking forward to hearing what you guys have to say today. Thank you very much.
Well, hi, everybody, and thanks, John. And I totally agree. I was telling John when we first met on these calls that I'm a huge library fan, and you often see the intersection of not just incubators, but other entrepreneurship centers that we represent, including the SBDCs. Right where I live locally, the SBDC will host a lot of coaching classes in our community room at our local library. So big fan of libraries, and we love the future trajectory of how we could work together. So next slide, please. Has everybody mentioned? Oh, sorry, one more. Sorry, Amber. Thanks. I work for the International Business Innovation Association. I know a lot of the headliners today mentioned we're going to talk about incubators, but as I just said, we talk more about entrepreneurship centers and basically anybody that supports entrepreneurs, to John's point, in a more formal setting. So that includes incubators, accelerators, co-working spaces, the SBDCs I mentioned, events like Startup Weekend, et cetera. And I like to say that we don't necessarily work directly with entrepreneurs, but we are the coaches, the mentors, and therapists to America's small business mentors and coaches and therapists. And so a lot of our members come to us, as well as the greater community. As you can see here, we represent a little under 500 entrepreneurship centers across the world. 70% are domestic, but we are in about 62 countries. So we have a big footprint across the world. And what we do, if you can go to next slide, please, Amber, is curate, strategize, and standardize some of the best practices that are out there. So in a minute, I'm going to be quiet and let my fellow members showcase a bit of what they're doing. But how we showcase and curate these best practices through 4 pillars that I show here. So I'll ignore a bit about the international simply, or the global network, simply because today we're talking domestically. But consider us a resource. We do have some resources for entrepreneurs, but like I said, we basically focus on the organizations that support entrepreneurs. Could be everything from running an efficient operations behind the scenes and how to work with your entrepreneurs, how to make the selection processes. Some of these entrepreneurship centers, not all, but some require an application, and so they have selection and vetting processes so that you can enter them, especially like an accelerator, or especially where there's money involved with a seed fund or an angel fund. And so we really culminate what are those best practices to make sure there's no selection bias, how to make it fair for people to enter these programs, et cetera. We also show how to run one efficiently, where to go get the funding to develop these centers, et cetera. And then on the front side, where we look at best practices and the best programming that there are for entrepreneurs, we have a wide gamut of resources that I'll show you in a second where you can go gather those. Some of them are in the forms of white papers. We have various publications. We have a very cool free benchmarking survey that's undergoing right now with the Economic Development Administration called the Impact Index Survey. That's free knowledge for anybody to go look at what are different entrepreneurship centers doing across the country. Everything, again, from what they do front of the house and back of the house as well. And then we have some training and other resources, webinars that are free, a lot of different resources to essentially help, again, those who help entrepreneurs. So next slide, please. And so I was just going to speak very briefly to the evolution of where our entrepreneur centers are heading, because to the point of John, and I loved his list of the 7 types of entrepreneurs that libraries often serve. I would almost say we serve some of the other companies that are out there. So if you are on a high growth trajectory and you require very intensive, capitally intensive equipment like manufacturing, if you have a company in materials or chemistry, if you need access to a commercial kitchen because you're taking that food truck or a food product or beverage product to the next level, we have some sector specific entrepreneurship centers that now are becoming the hub of their ecosystem because they have these hard to access resources or expertise to help those types of companies. And so what you're seeing, if you can go to the next slide, Amber, is that everybody talks about the epitome of the entrepreneurial ecosystem being Silicon Valley. I would argue that our organization is helping all the other parts of America rise up and provide the ecosystem of services and resources to their entrepreneurs to maybe not emulate Silicon Valley, but certainly have the same density and the same amount of resources to that potential. Next slide. And so I love showing, I know this may seem a bit academic, but I love showing that we are a part of the ecosystem and we're pretty clear about that. And I think between, where John showed the libraries and the resources that both Kim and Leanne shared, we take care of the other part. Again, access to things that may be a little bit more difficult, may require, again, an application process or building out your business model so you can access resources that are more intensive or funding. Next slide, please. And so I love this. I know you've heard Kauffman a bunch of times already, and certainly they are a giant pillar in the community of supporting entrepreneurs. But again, we're just part of the framework of what helps ecosystems, what helps entrepreneurs in those ecosystems. And next slide, please. So just a couple of statistics. Again, part of what we do is to support the entrepreneurship centers and those who help entrepreneurs. So, why go to these kinds of resources, whether they're libraries, incubators, accelerators, co-working spaces, et cetera, is that if you are going to that high growth trajectory, you're going to have a much better chance of going to one of our established facilities to help with that growth, mostly because of, like I said, access to capital, access to equipment, et cetera. And the same applies to the sustainable funding, just like libraries. These are institutions and resources that will be around for a long time to support you build your company. Next slide. So here's where I wanted to get to the good stuff. This is the free resources we have on our website. You simply go to our website under services. You'll see in big bold letters, free resources. This is just some of the white papers and reports and documents and tools and templates that we have for free. Again, mostly to people who support entrepreneurs and are coaching or helping them grow. Next slide, please. And so here's just some of the many topics that we cover in terms of supporting the entrepreneurs. So like I said, I'd rather go to describing what some of our members are doing locally, how they play a role in their ecosystems. We have 3 different venues, if you will, of supporting different types of entrepreneurs. And I know earlier Joe Cap had mentioned today that there's going to be another kind of analogous, if you will, webinar on Thursday about urban and rural resources for entrepreneurs. So let's consider this a kickoff to that. We're going to start today with Paul Reiser out of Techtown, Detroit, who's going to talk about some of the awesome services they've done for urban entrepreneurs in the Detroit, Michigan area. Then we'll move on to Tom Mancuso, who's going to talk about more rural settings and some of the amazing things that entrepreneurs in rural environments can find at their disposal. And then we'll round up today with Todd Connor out of Bunker Labs, who does a phenomenal job in terms of supporting veteran entrepreneurs, and veterans as in those who've served in our military. So without further ado, I'll have Paul kick off Techtown Detroit, please.
Thank you, everyone. Can you guys hear me? Hopefully so. This is Paul Reiser, and I apologize if you guys can't see me through the camera, but I'm happy to be here. Welcome everybody to eShipWeek, and thank you for allowing me to take some time to talk about Techtown Detroit. I am, once again, Paul Reiser. I'm Managing Director of Tech-Based Entrepreneur Programs here at Techtown Detroit. I'm also the recently named inaugural Director of Detroit Urban Solutions Consortium, which that position starts March 1st. And I'm a proud board member of InBIA as well. So what's Techtown Detroit? Techtown Detroit is the city's most established incubator and accelerator. We were founded in 2000 by Wayne State University, Henry Ford Health Systems, and General Motors. And we sit right in the heart of Detroit's Midtown area. And so today I want to talk to you about our three main business units, which are labs, blocks, and space, and then the services we provide to our community and what impact we've been able to make thus far. So let's go ahead and get started and move to the next slide. Labs. Techtown is a standalone nonprofit 501c3 that was founded with technology-based economic development in mind. So today, Techtown's Labs business unit works with early ideation stage entrepreneurs. We work also with advanced tech high growth potential entrepreneurs, as it was mentioned earlier, and everyone in between, honestly. Labs is industry agnostic, and we service probably about 100 to 125 companies a year. Two of our key labs programs are the Techtown Business Incubation Center program and then DTX Launch Detroit. DTX stands for Detroit Technology Exchange. The Techtown Business Incubation Program connects entrepreneurs and residents with early stage tech startups for very specialized and tailored coaching services. While DTX is our summer college student accelerator program focused on talent development, attraction, and retention for our city and state. Next slide. So DTX Launch Detroit is awesome. It affords us the opportunity to connect with some of the best minds on college campuses and recent grads across the state, and even students from outside of the state of Michigan. Teams apply for this competitive program. They have to be willing to build a tech business in the state of Michigan. And during the summer, they're surrounded by great coaches. They join a cohort of 10 to 12 teams. They build their professional network, and then they launch their own tech startup. We take no equity or ownership in the companies, and teams are actually paid a $7,500 stipend to participate. So top teams are also eligible to win an additional $20,000 in cash and prizes, thanks to great sponsors and supporters from across the state. Next slide. Excuse me. Over the past few years, from an ecosystem building perspective, we've been able to identify opportunities to go deeper with our work in specific verticals, both across southeastern Michigan and even into Ontario, Canada. So this is where we really want to amplify our strengths and fill gaps that we identify in the ecosystem. And some of those activities are in areas such as healthcare under the umbrella of MedHealth, which brings healthcare startups, payers, providers, and investors together to drive our state's #1 economic sector kind of forward. Another example is in the water tech space. Obviously, we're surrounded by the Great Lakes, but this is an event where we bring together 5 other cities that sit on the Lake Erie Basin to deliver the Erie Hack Data and Engineering Competition. Again, working to leverage our unique strengths and meet market needs via innovation, collaboration, and entrepreneurship. Next slide. So the next business unit is Blocks, and that is as in city blocks. Blocks was created about 6 years ago in response to a need and demand in our community for non-tech focused companies. And not only startups, but what we like to call bin-ups, or businesses that have been in existence for years, and they still need support services as well. So this is where we deliver place-based and neighborhood programming for retail and wholesale enterprises. Blocks was our answer to the call from the community for those who are outside of Midtown and downtown core and still need support services. Next slide. So SWAT City sits within the Blocks business unit, and this is how we stepped in and tried to meet entrepreneurs truly where they are. Physically going into neighborhoods and commercial corridors across the city of Detroit to help them establish and or grow their brick and mortar retail and wholesale businesses. We started SWAT City with an initial neighborhood partnership, and our growth model has been to only enter neighborhoods where we've been invited to come into those communities by partners. So listed in the slide, you see some of the neighborhoods across the city where we have a small satellite office and where we provide business support services with great partners. Next slide. So very much like tech-based entrepreneurship accelerators, a few years ago, we adopted and applied this model to non-tech companies. So TechTown's Retail Bootcamp is an intensive 10-week program that prepares serious entrepreneurs for opening their brick and mortar establishments in Detroit. The curriculum is designed to really strengthen businesses from pop-up stage to permanent location as they look to be successful in today's retail environment. Next slide. So last but not least, space is our third business unit, and make no mistake about it, I realize and we realize this is our physical spaces where much of the magic happens for our organization, for our entrepreneurs, and for our extended network. I mean, within the last few years and in sync with a lot of Detroit's growing resurgence, we've been able to support tons of positive growth in Detroit's entrepreneurial ecosystem, but we really seek to be the open door by trying to build social capital where anyone and everyone feels comfortable in showing up. Next slide. So this is just a few photos of our space and how it's utilized. Junction 440 is the name because our address is 440 Borough Street in Midtown Detroit, so it's synonymous with that. Next slide. So as with the Blocks business unit years ago, TechTown tends to want to challenge our mission a bit while growing with the changing needs in our community. So these two noted projects exemplify our efforts to try to do that, and that's meet market demands and needs. The Detroit Urban Solutions is a new initiative with key partners to develop a world-class innovation district to grow the greater Detroit's tech sector and address persistent urban challenges in areas such as energy, water, healthcare, smart city technologies, and others. The idea here is really if we can prove solutions work in greater Detroit and in Detroit, then we can scale those solutions to other locations across the country and even globally with great partners. Next slide. So the Detroit Innovation District. For us, Detroit's Innovation District is where leading edge anchor institutions and companies kind of cluster or connect and work with startups and business incubators and accelerators. So what you see in this graph is a 4.3 square mile map that highlights some of the organizations and partners we work with that also have a tech focus in Midtown and downtown Detroit. Next slide. So not until maybe about 6 or 7 years ago did the folks at TechTown realize that we probably would be around for some time and came into the notion of starting to collect key metrics for better understanding and being able to articulate our impact. So these are just a few metrics, key metrics, both a longitudinal view of a 10-year span between 2007 and 2017, and then there's some numbers for 2018 separately. And without reading the numbers, I think the key thing here is to note that we not only started doing more work over the past 5 years based on growing demand, but we honestly started doing a better job at actually collecting the data from our staff and clients. So this is still a big work in progress, so it's ongoing, but we're doing a much better job. Next slide. I think that brings me to my conclusion, actually. So with that, thank you for listening. Please do visit techtowndetroit.org and learn more about our work, and you can email me directly at paul@techtowndetroit.org. Thank you, guys.
Okay, thank you. Tom, I believe you're unmuted. Are you able to?
Yes, ma'am. Sure am.
Great.
Well, hello, and thanks for letting me be part of this great webinar today. I'm Tom Mancuso, the president of the Mancuso Business Development Group, and we've been providing the leadership and services to generate prosperity for people by adaptively reusing empty or underutilized properties since 1959. We currently direct the operations of over 2 million square feet of job and business-focused buildings. In the past 60 years, we've worked for communities and property owners of all shapes and sizes in a variety of locations, both urban and rural. Our firm started when the founder, my father, created the world's first business incubator by creatively combining services and business assistance to fill a large empty factory in a small rural city. The concept I'd like to share with the folks in rural places today is to actively take the initiative to create mission-driven, prosperity-promoting places in your hometown that are locally owned and controlled, self-sustaining, and tailored to your unique situation. Next slide, Amber. Most rural communities would like to have more successfully locally owned businesses. Many of these small towns also have empty, obsolete, and underutilized commercial, industrial, or institutional properties such as old factories, department stores, schools, churches, etc. Often, these buildings become blighted eyesores that can contribute to a downward spiral, both economically and psychologically. A solution to both of these challenges can be achieved by combining them. Revive and revitalize the empty buildings to create a community-based entrepreneurial center. This should be a place that helps people pursue an entrepreneurial path to become financially independent and happy. Your place's allocation of space for office, industrial and commercial uses, or shared workspaces for makers, foodies, and techies will vary according to the realities of your actual rural area. Next slide, please. These are some examples of grassroots success stories. In a rural village of 5,000, they acquired a high vacancy 80,000 square foot retail plaza that was in decline because it created a blighted entrance to their community and a noticeable loss of sales and property tax revenue for the community. They engaged help to clarify a vision, stabilize the site, and provide leadership to move them forward. By stopping the decline, they were able to attract and secure a private developer who tweaked the tenant mix and made other business-friendly changes that returned the commercial center to productive use and positive tax contributions. In a small city of 20,000, its local development corp acquired a vacant, distressed 500,000 square foot factory. They were motivated by issues that included removing blight, the lost jobs, and the lost property taxes. When they failed to obtain funds for demolition, which was actually their plan A, they initiated a feasibility study of alternative uses that included the possibility to start a mixed-use business incubator. They engaged experienced leadership and services to build a local team which achieved operational break-even in 3 years. By year 5, there were over 100 jobs, and now, 10 years later, there are more than 50 businesses and over 250 jobs and still growing at that rural site. In yet another small village, this time of 3,000, local citizens responded to decades of downtown vacancy and disinvestment by creating a local for-profit LLC to attract, combine, and channel small local investments. They strategically acquired and renovated chronic problem properties, and they worked together to identify desired uses and locate and vet local entrepreneurs to encourage with supportive leasing practices. In their first 9 years, they achieved more than $2.5 million of private reinvestment, 27 new businesses, and 80 jobs created. And these are just some of the kinds of examples of things your community can do. These types of efforts can create value for independent small business owners that attract them to locate and grow in your town by reducing their risk with the strategic sharing of whatever entrepreneurial resources are available in your place. Rural places, by virtue of their smaller populations, often experience less deal flow and market velocity, so they need to be more creative and open to bootstrapping. Every business is important. So ideally, these efforts are open to all comers: tech, service, artisan makers, lifestyle businesses, and so on. Your particular community of entrepreneurs. Next slide, please. The keys to making efforts like this work include committed community leadership, because nobody's going to care more or work harder for your place than you do for yourself. Clarify your measurable win. Is it jobs, business starts, removing blight, or something else? Tell the truth about what your resources are that your unique situation has to offer in terms of things like workforce, skills, local funding, or entrepreneurial expertise. What can a business owner, what value can you create for them? Then create a plan and a team to succeed based on your objectives and your market realities. Strategically craft a plan that assembles and manages an appropriate collection of talent to achieve stable, self-sufficient local operations. And keep in mind that you can manage costs by balancing the mix of volunteers to paid staff relative to the project's size, complexity, and secure funding. Existing buildings often facilitate the ability to bootstrap a project, and it typically takes 3 to 5 years for most projects to stabilize. Then you need to protect your progress with an objective process to measure key metrics. Constantly learn, evolve, and be prepared to survive in a world where, as my father used to say, every business is in some stage of leaving your community, even the newest startup. Next slide. In closing, please remember that every place has its own unique collection of economic potential. I encourage you to look around your hometown with new eyes to creatively identify and activate the opportunity in your rural community. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Todd, are you able to hear us?
I
Yes.
am. Thank you, Amber.
Perfect.
Great to be with everybody, and just really excited to have just a few minutes here to close out the call and share a perspective as one person running an organization, an ESO, which is the lingo for Entrepreneurship Support Organization. As one person running an organization that's specifically out there in the world trying to appeal to a particular population set. So as I kind of dive into my perspective, I would encourage those of you that are working in libraries who are looking for opportunities to invite and support entrepreneurs. I think my punchline message is kind of don't go it alone. Find organizations like Bunker Labs and other population-focused organizations and invite them into your environment, because we're always happy to come, and having that space, having a physical presence in the community is absolutely core to how we go and do our work. So next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we're an organization that's trying to help military veterans start and grow businesses. We really think that in order to help military veterans start businesses, that we have to create role models that remind them of themselves. So how we tell stories, how we're active on social media, how we hold up and create role models that remind the military veteran community and military spouses of their own lived experience is really important. Next slide, please. One of the things that we know from the data is that 25% of transitioning military service members want to start their own business, but only about 4.5% of post 9/11 service members actually will do that. And the question becomes why? Why aren't more people starting businesses? And if you actually look at the data that InBIA and Kauffman Foundation and JP Morgan Chase and others have done, it's actually really alarming. The rates of entrepreneurship in this country are down. We assume that young people are highly entrepreneurial, and they are, but if you look at the actual rates of new business formation, those rates are declining. So even though we have the mega stories like Facebook, we know that the trend is actually in some ways reversed from what it looked like after World War II and among the boomers that continue to start businesses at a big rate in this country. So if you have libraries full of folks over the age of 50, don't assume that they're not the entrepreneurial types. In fact, that's where a lot of the entrepreneurial action is. And conversely, if you have 25-year-olds coming out and showing up in hoodies, don't assume that they have what it takes or that they have all the natural knowledge or resources. They too, in fact, need a lot of support. So for our community, we've got about 200,000 service members leaving the military. Like I said, about 25% of them want to start a business. And most of them say that lack of networks is a big challenge. And we know this to be true of a lot of communities. You know, the work that Paul's doing at Detroit Tech Town and the work that Tom's doing in rural entrepreneurship and other focused efforts are so important, because we know that unless people have a place to show up, and I would even say physical place, unless they have a physical place to show up and get connected It's really hard for them to find the support and the things that they need. It's not just a gap in education that they're struggling with. It's not just needing a class. It's in fact needing a community that's locally based that can connect them with what we like to say is one phone call away from the people and the resources that can be relevant. Next slide, please. I think that, here's a quote from the Kauffman Foundation. We keep hearing this word about ecosystem. Entrepreneurs thrive best in places where they have communities or ecosystem to draw upon. And really, I think where there's a library and where there are 5 people that want to gather and access resources, be it books or online resources, that's the beginning of an ecosystem. And so don't assume that it has to involve venture capitalists. Don't assume that it has to have some magical formula. It really just needs to be a starting point for people to gather. And we're very focused as an organization as Bunker Labs and being that first point of contact for military veterans, but not the last point of contact. We as an organization pride ourselves on being good at finding military veterans, but we don't claim to be the only organization that can educate them. We know that if it's Detroit, that Tech Town is where you got to be. If it's a rural community, it might be getting over to the library to meet the local librarian who can help you do some research for your next phase of business. And so, again, none of us is in this because we have all the answers. We need partners that can specifically go out there. So if you identified in your community wanting to support women in particular, or people over the age of 60, consider partners like AARP that have initiatives along those lines, or look at female-focused organizations that are in the business of targeting and supporting female founders. Or in the case of military veterans, please call us. Next slide. I'll move quickly just to acknowledge that there's a few things that we do. We also have an online program, Launch Lab Online, which I'll share the URL in the chat box so everyone can access that. But again, free and available. We focus on the pre-launch conversation, asking military veterans to do some career mapping. Are you ready for this? Do you have the personal financial security to do this? Before we even talk about your business plan. And we really think that demystifying entrepreneurship and creating low thresholds ways of starting the conversation are really important. Next slide. This is perhaps the most relevant. It's just a snapshot as to the cities in which we operate in today. So if you're in one of these markets in particular, we'd love to start a conversation with you. We are adding chapters just about every month. I'm actually in Washington, D.C. right now, live. We're at an event called The Muster, where we have about 300 people upstairs and a pitch competition that I'm missing, which is fine, because I get to see enough of those in my line of work, which is a good thing. But the next slide shows where we're headed. And if there's a way that we can support you, we have a strategy and sponsorship to support being in all 50 states. We think that geographic accessibility is really important. And military veterans in particular are concentrated in the southeast part of the country. 40% of them will return to the southeast. 38% live in rural communities. And so we know that they're not, military veterans in particular are not just all moving to Silicon Valley. The people in your community are not doing the same thing either, and that's okay. We need people starting businesses in Jacksonville, Kansas City, and Cheyenne, because that's where the opportunities are, and that's where they want to live and raise a family. So we'd love to start a conversation with you. And again, I think the bigger point for us is that there are opportunities to partner with other organizations like Bunker Labs. And if you are wanting to pursue entrepreneurship, I'd encourage you to reach out to partners like InBIA, and they can really help navigate, hey, here are the folks that could be resource opportunities, resource partners for you. And I just appreciate that everyone's making entrepreneurship a priority. Next slide, please. And this is just an example in Los Angeles. We're able to go to market with a volunteer leadership model. So where we can find a few dedicated, experienced veterans who have themselves started businesses, we believe that you can have a lot of impact. So I would make an argument, sometimes starting an ecosystem is as cheap as buying some coffee from Starbucks and putting up a flyer and saying, hey, we invite business owners to show up and talk about what's working and talk about what feels challenging. And if you just did that simple act, you're going to start a movement in your community that I know that from our own personal experience. Next slide. And I'll skip this, but some vanity metrics if you're interested in that. I'll say that when you support veterans, you're supporting diverse communities as well. And that's a legacy that we're proud of and that we're very focused on. What's not included here is rural populations, but again, we know that that's a significant part of who we're serving, where the point of connectivity in a community is very likely to be the library or the local coffee shop. And so don't underestimate your place in the community as a hub for entrepreneurship. And next slide, please. And if I can be helpful, please reach out. But I appreciate InBIA shining a light on this important topic. And thanks everybody for your consideration and for your support of military veterans as well.
Great, thank you so much to both of our lead speakers and our individual speakers under each of those lead partners. You did an incredible job, and we're so excited to share that recording with a larger network as well.
So just before we jump into this, I know we are at the top of the hour, so I first of all want to applaud the NBIA team and the EveryLibrary team for going ahead and sticking exactly to on the dot. We really appreciate that. Just a couple of small takeaways, and then we'll get out of here. Just a reminder from yesterday's conversations on the K through 12, the community colleges and the libraries with the veterans and the incubators and accelerators. Bringing those all together, if you don't know where to start, those are probably good places just to go ahead and start and say, hey, let's all get together. There's a wealth of resources of all the folks who are participating and have participated today, as well as the rest of the week. And all of them are open to working together in collaboration. It's part of the nature of National Entrepreneurship Week. So we really appreciate all of the wonderful speakers today. I learned a lot from a number of the speakers, and I always learn so much. So we really, really appreciate it from Gail and the work that they're doing in providing resources, but also with Todd and Bunker and Paul Reiser as well. So it's really a good conversation. In order to keep the conversation going, we're going to ask that you go ahead and add us on Twitter at National eShip Week, and go ahead and also as a reminder that tomorrow from 3 o'clock to 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, our goal is to go ahead and break Twitter by really raising the conversation about entrepreneurship to the highest levels possible. So during that time, feel free to tweet soon, early, and often, as we like to say. And then tomorrow, do you want to just give us a brief shout out about the webinar from Rome?
Yeah, so tomorrow at 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we will have a lineup of organizations that are focusing on elevating diverse voices in entrepreneurship. That lead partner is 1863 Ventures, which is a organization based in DC that helps serve a diverse population of entrepreneurs. They've worked with over 500 entrepreneurs themselves, and they are lining up some amazing speakers from across the country that are doing the same in their individual communities. So there are still some registrations available, and you can visit nationaleshipweek.org to register for that event.
And then just one final opportunity for 2020 National Entrepreneurship Week. We're looking at the possibility of establishing an advisory group, an advisory board, which would be comprised of organizations to really help increase and broaden the impact within the country across the United States. So if you or your organization is interested in participating as part of that advisory board, it's not a heavy lift or a heavy commitment, but we want to go ahead and let you know that you can subscribe and find out more information as we continue to release the details about that. In addition, we're also looking at establishing a statewide ambassador to really help drum up programs in all communities, regardless, every nook and cranny where there's a possibility for a program around entrepreneurship. It's to really help carry the water, serve as a champion. This program is something that it's very entrepreneurial. We're putting it together to see how people respond. But the goal is to go ahead and have one champion in every state. So feel free to go ahead and subscribe at the website itself. Anything else?
Just thank you again for participating, and there's been great conversation in the chat box, so we will be sure to send any resources to the speakers that have had questions posed for them. We'll share all those resources when we send out the webinar recording and the slide deck, so please keep an eye out for that. That will be released within the week as well, and will be available on our website as well. So thank you.
Great, thank you all. Thank you, John.